Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Thinnest Veil podcast. I am super excited today to be here with my friend Safrianna. Hi.
Hello. Hi.
I'm so glad you're here.
Me too.
Um, hey, let's start off with who you are and how you came to be here and what you do and all the things.
Oh gosh. Well, I'm Safrianna Lughna, the queer spirit guide. I'm a licensed trauma therapist turned transformational mentor. I'm a CEO of a small business and an author, a speaker, a sci-fi author. I feel like I really need to caveat with that, and a poet and a nonfiction author. So I do a little bit of everything. And just to, I guess, summarize how I got here, I started it as a small druid child when I was a little girl and spent all of my time in trees, and then went to public school and got disconnected from nature. And then finally circled back around who I really was in my 30s after going through two major careers as both a public school teacher and a trauma therapist, to finally put my druid hat back on and be who the fuck I really am, which is the queer spirit guide. So that's the long and short of it.
Nice. Yay. Tell me, let's start with that disconnection from nature. Because I
Yeah.
think so many people have experienced that disconnection in their lives. Can you talk a little bit about that and how it impacted your world?
Oh yeah. So like I just said, I literally like grew up in a tree. My first 6 years of being mobile was basically in a tree and out in the grass and picking wildflowers and doing all of the naturey things. And then public school happened, and this is what most of us go through. Most of us do end up going to public school. We end up with homework. We've got extracurriculars. We have all these things that we have to do, which prepares us to go be good little worker bees in the corporate office and a factory and whatever it might be, right? In in a school system, right? And this disconnects us from that going with the seasonal flow of how we're supposed to relate to Mother Nature and the outdoors. When public school hits, you pretty much have your spring break, your fall break, your winter break, and your summer break. So you have a quote unquote break or a vacation for each season, yay, but it's like 3 days to 2 weeks, except for summer break, which is this big long chunk when it's hot and it's miserable. And maybe you go to the beach, but then you're probably going to want to hang out in your air conditioning. So we've gotten completely like lost from the flow of how we're meant to relate to nature. And that is very much a product of capitalism and productivity culture and the hustle and grind and all of that.
I think I'm so glad you brought that up because I've talked a lot about how if we've made it past kindergarten, we've been through some sort of trauma.
Oh, absolutely.
And I
If you made
think
it past birth.
and I think but really it becomes very profound when we go to school. And
Hmm.
I really think a lot of it is that tearing away from nature and from our natural cycles of life. And
Hmm.
so I'm really glad you brought that up because I feel like it's why so many people are lost. And I actually had a conversation with our mutual friend Michelle Hawk, who we both know. And Michelle and I were actually talking about on the podcast about um people showing up fundamentally wounded.
Mm.
And when they enter into this spiritual exploration or they want healing, um, it's hard for them to recognize that a lot of this healing has to do with getting back and reconnected to ourselves through nature.
Yes.
We are naturally occurring things. And I really want to so you and I talk so much about our work in the spiritual world and
Mhm.
that white light and love bullshit. And
The shit I get really spicy about.
you actually do a lot of work, shadow work, but I'm wondering if you could talk a little bit about how people showing up in your experiences, showing up fundamentally wounded and that seeking, they want the quick and easy fix, right? Michelle and I, of course, were talking about it in the context of shamanism and plant medicine and how people are desperate for that well, I'm going to go and do this ceremony and everything's going to be better. So could you
Yep.
talk a little bit about how you've experienced that? Get spicy. Talk a little bit about how
Oh,
you've experienced that in your work.
yes. So I have ADHD, so feel free to rein me in, or if I'm going too far off
Um,
topic, pull it back in. But oh my gosh, yeah. Like the quick fix thing drives me bonkers because there is no quick fix. There's literally no quick fix. I talk about Trauma North all the time. Like it's one of my sort of downloads that came to me in my therapeutic work. And Trauma North is the concept of your true north, your core wounding, your fundamental wounding, whatever that is your trauma north. And you will circle back to it a billion times in your life. No
yep,
matter how much you have done your personal work, you've done the shadow work, you've seen the pattern, something will trigger you to bring you back to that trauma north for the rest of your life. Your only hope, my friends, is to gather the skills and the tools that when you hit the trauma north, you go, "Oh, I've been here before. I know what I'm doing." And you meet it with grace and compassion and maybe a little humor. But I have seen this so many times in my work with clients, with friends, with all kinds of people where when the going gets tough and we really start to make progress in our spiritual liberation and our healing, that all of a sudden we'll get very, very scared and want to change course and do that quick fix. That's often as soon as people kind of hit the, oh, I really know what now this is going to look like if I really do the work. And then we want that, that peyote ceremony, the ayahuasca, the ketamine. Oh my gosh, like we want whatever retreat is going to solve it. Whatever, there was a client I was working with, and all of a sudden they were like, "So I think I'm going to discontinue sessions with you because I just got a really great deal on this thing over here that's a 2 session package that's going to completely heal my nervous system in 2 sessions." And I was like, "Oh, is that so?" And I was like, I have questions about it, but please report back to me and let me know how it went. And sure enough, 2 sessions later, this person came back to me and said, wow, these people are really colonial white people
yep,
who don't bring any indigenous or people of color or any other perspectives into their work. And they're teaching that this is the one right way to do it. And I'm like, how about that? Like, this is what society has built us up to is here's all these problems. So not only do we have our core wounding, but then here's all of these other problems. You need to shave your legs. Oh, you've got acne. Oh, you've gained a little extra weight. Oh, you're not wearing the right fashion trends right now, right? Like there's all these manufactured problems that end up creating more wounds. And then we're going to find and buy the solutions for all those problems. So this is just like what we're used to at our society in this point. And I feel like I just need to veer off here to vent about in the spiritual community, how many frickin' people are selling products?
yeah,
Not not a
yes,
course, but a supplement.
yes,
Oh, if you buy this crystal, if you buy this water
yeah.
kit, if you buy this, it's gonna solve your problems for
Yeah.
you. No. It's
I guess
not how
on
it
the one
works.
hand, I guess on the one hand, we should be really grateful that they weren't bringing in other practices, indigenous practice and people of color practices as white people. Like, I guess we should be really happy about that. And
But
also,
then there's the ones who do.
yeah, they potentially could have consulted with some other folks to help other people who,
Right.
um, I think it's so interesting that as I've been having some like across the board conversations with folks recently here on the podcast. And it's really fascinating to me. I'm even talking to Dolly about immigration and that thread of capitalism,
Mm-hmm.
obviously, and colonization has been coming in every conversation I've been having on the podcast recently. And
Good.
I'm really curious. I want to ask you a little bit about how do we help people acknowledge that healing our souls? I mean, I believe that our souls are in this body to have this experience of being a human, and a lot of people believe that. How do we help people realize, like, really disrupt and dismantle the myth that there's a quick fix And how do we help people become more comfortable in acknowledging that this is a lifetime of work? Like you were talking about the trauma north, and I was like, oh yeah, I know exactly what that is. And
Mm-hmm.
and now that I've done all this work through therapy, through prayer, through my spiritual practice, I get it much faster. But
Yep.
and I know this is a lifetime. How do we help people become more comfortable with the idea that there's nothing's gonna fix this?
Ugh, I wish there was an answer for how to make it more comfortable other than sort of exposure therapy, which is life. Life itself is
Yeah, like
exposure therapy to your trauma and
yeah.
your triggers and all of that. But it is an acceptance process.
Mm,
And I invite you to think about in your life when you've had a really, really good day, or your day has started seemingly really bad. Like maybe you woke up and you were on top of the world, or you woke up and you had a really bad migraine headache or something.
mhm,
Then what was the rest of your day like after that? Did something really, if you woke up really, really great and like there was this just top of the world feeling, did something later that day come up that was equally as like seemingly negative? And if you woke up on the wrong side of the bed later that day, was there something wonderful waiting for you? Often that's the pattern. And when people start to get curious about this, that can start to thaw it, I feel like, because there's this acceptance that, oh, a thing that my ego says is good is here. Oh, a thing my ego says is bad is here. Huh, there are both of them. How about that? And then to understand that that is a balance, it's literally scales. And what we're trying to do in our life is harmonize with the flow of the shadow and the light. Sometimes we're really in the light, we're really doing things. And sometimes we're really in the shadow and we're really feeling things. But neither the light or the shadow or are black and white either. Like there's good stuff in the light and there's really negative stuff in the light and then there's really fantastic stuff in the shadow that we're so scared of going into the shadow that we miss. So for what's helped me is to look at things like an infinity symbol or the sideways 8, and one half is light and one half is shadow, and they kind of blend in the middle, and we're constantly riding these waves around the figure 8. And the more that you're like, oh my gosh, I'm feeling all these bad feelings right now, I'm really triggered, to understand, to accept, oh, and if I relax here, if I surrender here, I'm actually going to swing right back up into that light side again, and then I'm going to circle back around. And it is a going with the flow. What a lot of us try to do, so picture that figure 8 as a river, right? And you're in the shadow side and you grab onto a branch in the shadow side and you're like, no, I don't want to go with this flow anymore. So then you're just being bombarded by the shadow while you're hanging on for dear life and it feels extra awful. So it's accepting that we need to release and surrender and go with the shadow light. That is a human reality. I do not know any single person, even like Jeff Bezos, who doesn't have a shadow. Money doesn't solve shadow issues. Time doesn't solve shadow issues. They're always there for us to work with. So the sooner we can accept that, the sooner we can get back to accepting all of the happiness and joy and play and fun that come our way because we understand it's part of that slippy, slidey, infinity shadow light journey.
yeah. And you know what I love about that too is I think a lot about how I love um well, so we're mostly water, like our bodies are mostly water, right? As you're
Mm-hmm.
drinking your water.
I'm always drinking
And
water.
I love water. And the ocean, the ocean is constantly in harmony, working with the moon. It's constantly in harmony. It just keeps flowing. And like rivers always know the way. Like a river
Mm-hmm.
knows where it flows, which is why when we dam it up or we move it, um, it breaks through regardless,
Yep.
because it always remembers. Water always remembers, which means we always remember. So when we allow ourselves to get into that flow of just acknowledging the entirety of the human experience, then then we move forward out of darkness and forward into light. Like there's always there's always that cycle happening for us.
Mm-hmm.
Um and I'm really glad you brought that up because I think that if we can just remember the flow of our existence, then and that we are here to have this human experience. That means that feeling the entirety of our emotions gives us permission to be in harmony with that movement. And it, not to say it isn't hard, like, I'm all about, you know, holding on to the things I think are precious.
Yeah.
And I think that healing is about being able to recognize when I'm holding on to things too tightly, which doesn't allow me to be open to receiving, the expansiveness of my experience.
Right.
Oh,
Yeah, there's the water piece is so important too, that we we need to go with the flow, and sometimes nature teaches us that it's time to make a dam and stop things up. I was just thinking as we were talking about water about the story I heard about beavers the other day. There
mm,
was a government, and I don't remember if it was a state, another country. I honestly don't remember. I just was focused on the beavers. But they were going to spend like hundreds of thousands of dollars, if not millions of dollars, to build a dam, and they couldn't even come up with good plans. And then while they were arguing over it with the red tape, the beavers came along and built a better dam in exactly the spot because
yeah,
nature knows. And
yeah,
so sometimes we do need to stop our flow and slow down and pause and look at something or find our home in the shadow for a little bit to do some work. So there is some wisdom with the holding on or the pause when
yeah,
it's very intentional, like those beavers who intentionally went in and built the dam. They were like, "Oh, we need to, this is now going to be home for a while, right?" And so can we make that spaciousness to find home or sit down for a little while in the shadow or in an uncomfortable part of the light?
mm,
For just to throw out an example of what the light can look like that's uncomfortable, right? A lot of people, visibility, being visible, showing up, being public, that's a light side thing. That's doing something and standing literally in the light. But that brings up all that shadow stuff and
mhm,
all of the discomfort for a lot of people. So they are so intertwined that if you're trying to cut that uncomfortable stuff off and pretend it doesn't exist, you are now 50% of a human. And you're not going to feel very human because you're going to feel a little cheese off cracker, as my friend Red says, because you are cutting yourself off at the knees or at the waist. 50% of you is gone if you're trying to bypass that shadow.
yeah. Oh, so good. Um, what do you wish people understood about um this industry that has been built up? I think it's just intensified since the pandemic started in 2020. Like, if I look over the last 5 years, I mean, I remember when I first started doing all this work, um, thinking, I pray to God nobody thinks I'm a shyster, right? Like, I
Right.
really had to work through um, those feelings of thinking someone is going to think I'm full of shit, right?
Yeah.
Because there's so many people out there capitalizing and uh, on this movement towards spiritual growth that has just exploded ever since the pandemic. And I'm wondering if you have thoughts about that.
I have so many thoughts about that. So a little bit of backstory. Like I said, trauma therapist traditionally trained. In 2023, I officially decided like I wanted to take a break from therapy. But that was because in about 2022, I started interfacing with the online coaching world.
Oh boy.
And I had never opened that Pandora's box before. Didn't even know coaching was a thing, honest to God, aside from like sports coaching. I thought that, like, if you hired a coach, it had to do with fitness. That's literally what I thought. So to find out there was this whole world out there of business coaches and spiritual coaches and perimenopause coaches and like all kinds of coaches, I was like, wow, the possibilities here are fantastic. So when I decided to let my therapy practice go, I was like, I'm going to be a coach. Then I got deep in the coaching world
Mhm.
and I kind of ran away screaming because the ethical issues were everywhere. So bad. Like as you were saying, I was so scared to be like a seen as a shyster. I'm like, yeah, because there's a billion of them out there. Like there's so many predatory spiritual people. And I went to a talk Michelle Hawk did, and she talked about this. I loved it. Of people have a spiritual awakening,
Mhm.
and then they go hang their shingle and they're like, I'm a shaman now, and or I'm a druidic priestess. One of my I was like getting very activated about this, like talk about trauma north. This was definitely a trauma north. There was a coach I was following who was a fitness coach
Mhm.
who also ended up, like, within the span of a year, getting a druid priestess certification or something. I've been practicing druidry for about 20 years now, and at that point in time was like, could I even call, like, I have taken priestess vows. I have been practicing druidry for 20 years. I could call myself a druidic priestess if I wanted to. But then I see these people who are calling themselves that because they took a course on Udemy, and I'm like, what do my words even mean anymore? Like, it, for those of us who are trying to be ethical and do things in a really conscious and intentional way, it brings up all kinds of bullshit that we have to confront because of what other people are doing, usually to cut a profit. And there's so many people in the spiritual world who are just looking to cut a profit. There's, like I was saying earlier, I can't tell you how many people, they're like, I'm a priestess of blah, 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 blah. Also, I sell these supplements, or I sell these yoga pants that are made out of plastic, or I sell and I'm like, what? What are we doing here that isn't just trying to make money? Because to me, as a druid, my whole worldview is built on actually trying to sustain, protect, uplift, expand, etc., what nature is already doing, which means I need to consciously be reducing plastic and packaging and capitalistic BS and all of that. Like, that's what it means to be connected spiritually with the earth. So what are these people spiritually connecting with? Is the goddess Freya telling them to go forth and, sell a lot of things in an MLM and get a bunch of people on their team? Like, is that it stumps me. Like I said, I was gonna get spicy today. I get very crabby that there are all of these so-called, like, and these are the same people that are like, yes, you can find enlightenment, achieve it, and then you're there. No, you
Well,
can't while you're in a human body. You can't
and
keep it. You can find it for a second.
and what this is really bringing up for me too is I'm thinking, as I'm listening to you talk and I'm thinking about my own journey. I mean, I what's the difference? What do you think the difference is between, so some of us, it takes us a long time to be safe enough and to feel courageous enough and brave enough to actually say, well, this is who I am. I mean, I remember
Mhm.
when and yes, about the coaching world, like I was all in until I was like, oh, hell to the no. Trauma informed coaching, no, no.
Oh,
I went to
trauma-informed
college.
coaching's a lie.
It is. And I went to college for that. And I actually know you're traumatizing more people. So, because I also used to be a therapist. So, what is the difference? And I really struggled with calling myself a Christian witch, right? Because people in the Christian world were like, you can't be a witch, and you can't be pagan, and in the and it was actually worse. The backlash was worse in the witchcraft world because they were like, you're not allowed to be a Christian. And I'm like, I think Jesus put me on this planet just like this. So I guess this is who I am. And
Yeah.
eh, like wrestling with that for like a year. Like it was like
Mhm.
this push and pull and this tug, and do I say who I am and what I practice and what my spiritual beliefs are across the board? How do I do that safely and in a way that makes me feel like I am being courageous while I'm also wrestling with this? Are people going to think I'm a big ass shyster, which I'm not? And so um and then, of course, this voice pops into my head like, if you have to say you're not, you probably are. And then I get down this fucking roller coaster of
I
ridiculousness.
see you, little tender part. I see you.
So, some people come to this late in life, right?
Mhm.
This is a journey of living. We've already discussed that. So, how do people tease apart the authenticity and the rootedness in authentic spirituality and magic, I guess?
Would you do what you're doing and experience what you're experiencing without making money off of it or without needing to make money off of it? Is my
Yeah,
first
absolutely.
question.
Absolutely.
Like,
Yeah.
if you're in a I'm only doing this because it cuts a profit, or I would only practice this if I can make money off of it, it's not really for you. It's not authentic. I love the question. If you could do blank for the rest of your life and not get paid for it, what would be the thing that you would pick to do?
Right.
Your spirituality should be for you first.
Yes.
Your authentic expression should be for you first. How you take care of your
Mhm.
body should be for you first. And then because this is the thing that I preach it to the rooftops every chance I get, which is that the most important healing work you can do is simply showing up as who you really are, standing in the power of that and continuing to expand on that. Healing past layers, because that is the number one impact that you can have on others, is them seeing you growing and expanding and healing and learning and all of that. So when it's for you, it's not for a partner, it's not for your child, it's not for your company, it's not for the dollar. That's gonna be how you know you're being authentic.
Yeah.
Like, I'm over here not making really a whole lot of money off of being an author yet, but I literally want to be an author for the rest of my life, whether I make $1 million off of it or not, because
Right.
that dream has followed me since I was 6. So
Yeah.
pretty much old enough to actually like write
Yeah.
and like write full sentences. That's when I knew I was a writer. So it's like, what if you roll back in time, if you think about who you were before, insert mom, dad, coach, partner, etc., here that said, I don't like that. Roll back in time to the pieces that you abandoned. That's probably who is really authentic in there. And we can make space to get to know these parts and
Mhm.
invite them forward. They're probably hiding in the shadow though. So we
Mhm.
have to be willing to sit down in the shadow and invite these parts of us to come tell us what they really want, need, etc., that has been hidden under all of the codependent people pleasy bullshit that we do.
I love that so much because that's something that I encourage the people that I work with to do too. Like who were you before you got told you can't be this thing, right?
Mhm.
Um I often think about how when I was little I would pretend that I was the president. I always wanted to be the president. So when I was
I
little,
want you to be the president.
yes. No. When I was little and my friends were being nurses and teachers, like we're playing make believe, I was the president,
I
right?
love that.
And and I have a picture of my grandmother from when she was little. And she's like she's in her little like dress and with her little boots, and she's covered in mud, right? She's just filled, her hair's a mess, she's covered in dirt. You can tell she's been climbing trees and doing all sorts of shenanigans or things. And I keep that picture right here because to remind me, like, my grandma was always getting a little bit dirty, right? She was just like
Mhm.
always messing around. That's her, that's who she was. And
Right.
when we roll ourselves back to those moments and those spaces, it's amazing what we realize about our capacity as adults, right?
Mm.
When we allow the who we were to actually start to inform what we're doing, that
Mhm.
creativity and that abundance and that imagination really amplifies itself when we get to live in the imaginary world again, right? Like I just think there's something really powerful about what you're saying about kind of rolling back and then allowing. I hate the word inner child because it's so ridiculous.
I was like, why are you not saying inner child? Like I was
Because I
picking
hate
up on it. So
right
this
about
is how
that.
I reframe it as inner children
Yeah,
and child parts,
yeah,
because most of our wounding, to go back to that fundamental wounding, we have lots, we have
yeah,
many
so much.
traumas, we have many
So much.
trials, and each of those experiences had a little child part that
Yeah,
experienced it and is now inside holding on to that memory for us.
yeah.
And So what did they like? What did they do before that wounding came in?
Mhm.
How do we get to know them? How do we invite that? Yeah, because I think inner child simplifies it too much because there's like this idea that there's one child in it. No, there's many inner
Yeah.
children in there, many parts that are
Yeah.
still childlike and holding on to your innocence, your creativity, your playfulness, your imagination, right? Adults think that we don't imagine or that there's nothing to imagine once you're an adult, but you can do art. You can imagine what recipe you're going to make. You can imagine a song or a story. Like there's so many different ways we can use our imagination that aren't what we would think a child, like we don't have to play make believe. I still do. I play Dungeons and Dragons, so I still play make believe. I love it. But
Yeah.
like we don't have to play make believe, but we can use that creative force, but we're not going to be able to if we're shoving all of those wounds and those childlike parts down.
Well, and I feel like in the Foofy Lala world, we do that by talking about live as if.
Mhm.
That is using your imagination, right? We've
Right.
put it in this gooey term that, oh my God. Okay, so here's where my brain went. Uh, can we talk about our obsession with trauma masturbation for just a minute? That
Yes, please
you
explain.
have not lived, and you are not being authentic unless you're giving me the dirtiest, nastiest bits of your story.
Oh, so trauma dumping, floodlighting or
Yeah, I call it trauma
floodlighting?
masturbation because we get
I
off
love
on
that.
it.
Oh my gosh. Yes. Okay. So
And
we
how
really
does that tie into us and the work that we do? Yeah, go
yeah,
ahead.
I don't know if I'm going to answer that part, but we'll see.
Okay.
The work we do, you and I, or the work we do collectively, because
All
oh
of
my
it.
gosh,
Go.
all of it. So I actually recently heard this term floodlighting, I think is what it's called, and it's a dating trend that's happening apparently where you show up on your first date and you like literally tell all the nastiest parts of your story. This is and it's not a good trend, friends. It's not good at all.
No! Look at my face!
I know. I'm watching your. I'm like, yeah. People who are listening to the audio, you're missing out on us pulling our hair out right now.
Here's
Oh gosh. Ugh, it's a thing. I used to in my 20s do this, my early 20s. Not every time I'd go out on a new date, but like three dates in, I'd be like, by the way, I need to like tell you some really scary stuff from my past just to make sure you know what you're getting into. And it was the, so that you are informed on what you're getting into. By the time I was like 24, 25, I realized the strategy was not working in any way, shape, or form, and I should probably stop doing it. And then that was also around the time I really got into therapy and had a person to go talk to and dump all of my stuff on because that was their actual job.
all the
This is,
therapists.
yes. Call your therapist. We have a belief that talking about things is going to solve them, that we're going to get over it. Um, I mean, there's someone near and dear in my life that I call out on probably almost a weekly basis. I'm like, hey, you're talking about that thing again that you've been talking about for the last 8 years. Is it helping that you're talking about it right now?
Yeah.
Do you need to maybe do something else with that, like move your body or journal or write a poem or
Go to
anything
your
other than
therapist.
talk about it? Go to your therapist because talking about it only uses one part of the brain. We have to do something else with it. And I think that so that's one part is we think it's going to help us because we have heard the story, a burden shared is a burden lifted. I agree with that. When everybody is informed that that's what we're doing together. But the other thing is that I am so wounded. I want to tell this person all of my wounding so I know that they'll accept all of the parts of me that have
Right.
been wounded and also accept potentially why I'm going to continue my poor behavior because of these wounds. I've now given myself well, now I can point. Remember, I told you about that time that I got beaten by blah, 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 and now I'm just scared of everything having to do with being in proximity with blah, 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 blah. Like, it can be an excuse to not expand or heal in our own work.
Yeah.
Because I experienced this thing, I can never this. And that can also be valid. It's valid when it's an authentic choice of, I've actually realized I don't like that thing, so I'm not going to do that thing anymore, versus this terrible thing happened to me, and even though I love that thing, I'm never going to touch it again because insert trauma here. So I think that we spin ourselves up and try and floodlight and just flood people with our deepest, darkest traumas in order to feel validated, accepted, and safe that they're not going to abandon us because of our core wound. But it can backfire and cause people to more quickly leave because they're like, why the hell are you telling me this on the third date? Um, and it's never going to solve that trauma north loop. You could talk about it 50 times. If you only talk about it, you're never going to get anywhere. There has to be
Well,
other
and I
stuff.
went to this women's spirituality conference before the pandemic, and every single person that got on that stage, they're supposed to be motivational speakers, and they are talking about the most horrifying shit. And there was literally someone who experienced it so badly, she had a physical response to the point where they had to call paramedics. Like that's how graphic people were getting on the stage. And I think in this healing world, people think if they get up and go into graphic detail about rape and assault and child abuse and like all these things, like how do we shift that, Safriana? Like how do we shift that? We can talk about our healing process without going into graphic detail about,
Detail, yes.
I don't want to talk about that.
That is such a good point. Yeah, this is something I don't really think about how I do it. So I'm trying to think about how I do it because I am a many time survivor of trauma, including sexual assault and
Sure.
domestic violence, and I talk
Oh,
about it all the
yeah,
time in like podcasts and stuff.
yeah,
But I have gotten to the point where like I'm very confident in how I talk about it because I'm actually trauma informed and have done the work around that and have the education and know that you can talk about trauma without trauma dumping. It's
yeah,
very
without being
different.
graphic.
Yes, I'm thinking about like there was a podcast I was recently on where we were talking about sexual assault and we got into some nuances, but never once did I describe detail
Right.
about what was happening other than vague because here's the thing psychologically. If you are thinking it, it is your body is having a response as if that thing is happening to you.
Right.
So if I tell you in a blow by blow account the awful traumatic thing that happened to me, you can
Yeah.
internally experience bits and pieces of that, which is exactly why some people are going to have some somatic trauma responses to hearing. Like I can't watch gore at all because I
No.
can then feel feel it in my own body. Can't do it. So we need to maybe focus on the impact of the trauma on ourselves.
Yes.
So after I was sexually assaulted, I felt, unworthy. I felt like an alien in my own body. I didn't want to be in my own body. I was dissociative. That's the stuff that people really need to hear is there was a trauma and here's the impact of the trauma. Not let me tell you 15 minutes of the story of how I was brutalized
Yes.
so now you're just in shock about the thing that you've heard. And now when I give you the common humanity and the skill building, you're not going to hear it anymore because you're
No. And
you're
and
having a response.
yeah, and I think the thing, what I love about what you're saying is that I want people to know that you don't have to validate your experience by getting graphic,
Right.
which is this weird ass expectation that people have. Well, how do I know it's real? How do I know you're not making it up?
Well, and that's like if someone asks for more details explicitly and you're open to sharing them, maybe it's okay. If someone literally is like, I would, are you open to telling me more about that? I'm curious
Right.
to know, or I'd like, I would like to. But here's the other thing is even when someone asks you to share your trauma deeply, most people can't handle it.
Mm-mm.
Can't tell you how many times that's happened to me where I'll say, I am a many time sexual assault survivor. So I
Mhm.
have got big boundaries and big feelings around my body and how sexuality is approached. That's a great thing to say potentially if you're
Sure.
dating
Yeah.
someone you're going to get sexual, but I don't have to go into the 18 stories or exactly what happened or how what I don't have to. I can draw the boundary and state the thing. But then I've had people go, "Oh, well, can you tell me what happened?" And I'm like,
Yeah.
you
No.
sure you want me to? And they're like, yes. And then I have, and then they're like shell shocked because they're
Yeah.
like,
No.
I didn't know it could possibly be that bad. And I'm like, well, you asked. And I
Well, and
told,
I
so now I
and,
don't.
like, yeah, I've this is what I've learned from living with someone with PTSD. I'm like, "Well, do you wanna tell me that story?" And he's like, "No, not really." And I'm like,
Yeah.
"Okay, good." Right?
We'll
Like,
just stop there. Thanks.
okay. Like, anyway, you and I could go off for hours about this, but we don't have
We
that much
could.
time. So, I think to wrap up this conversation, um, and to give you an opportunity to get spicy again if you want.
Oh gosh.
Um, what are what are a couple of conscious things that you want people to know about the healing industry, doing shadow work, and honoring this experience we have of needing to get back to nature?
Oh gosh. Well, some of the best healing can be free, first of all. If someone is trying to charge you thousands and thousands and thousands and thousands of dollars to do something, question that, first of all. And
Mhm.
I say that as a person with a multi-thousand-dollar program, but
Right.
it's not you sitting with me for 2 hours and I hold space and simply by being with me, you heal. No. Anybody who's selling just their presence as a healing method for you, run. Um, but
Yeah.
yes, some of the best healing is free and
Mhm.
can be done on your own, but you need the skills and tools to begin to grow that. That's where a good therapist, a great self help book, a friend who has maybe done some healing work before and can maybe give you some tips, pointers, etc., on what they used, talking to people about how they navigate their own grief, growth, trauma journey. Um, Not going with the first quick fix you find,
Mhm.
not going with the first coach who cold DMs you and says that they think you're their next shiny person, not with the not with the spiritual guru that says this is the way. Like
Mhm.
anything and anyone that is telling you there's one right way to do things, run. Run the other way because that's not going to heal you. That is predatory. There are so many different ways to heal. And shadow work, most of us are deeply, deeply afraid of because we're terrified of what we're going to find in the shadow. Friend, you've already lived it. You've already been there. You've already gotten through it. There is nothing in your shadow that's going to end your life when you spot it because, again, it's already been there. You've
Yeah.
already lived it.
Mhm.
So, the more that we can accept that and lean in and relax and remember parts. So I consider myself a parts therapist above all because I see the soul, the highest self, the true self, which cannot even be fully contained in the human body because it's so vast and big. And then there's everything that's stored in the human body. And inside this human body, we have our ego, and then we have all these little parts of us. There's the part that wants pizza for dinner, and there's the part that wants Chinese for dinner, and there's the part that's angry, and there's the part that's happy. We have all these different experiences happening within us at the same time. So for the shadow work to go, this part of me experienced this really sad, traumatic, awful thing. And I'm going to look at them as a friend
Mhm.
and as an entity of its own, not the entirety of who I am. That little bit of separation can begin to really change the healing process because then we're not letting that traumatized part run the show. We're seeing them as one facet of the larger story. So remember your own trauma and your own healing journey is just one facet of your larger story and your life is not meant to be healing 24/7. And anybody who's like, you're behind on your healing. No, you're not.
Yeah.
Everybody's journey looks different. But again, you don't have to go spend lots of bucks on quick fixes or fancy solutions or supplements or any of that. Go put your feet on the earth. My
Yeah.
favorite thing when I'm hijacked is to go stand on the moss in my driveway and wiggle my toes on the moss and breathe for 5 minutes and then come back inside and see how I'm feeling.
Yep.
Nature is free. Now, if
Yep.
you live in a really not not well supported, super urban area where you don't really have a lot of greenery, totally get you. Hopefully there's a park nearby or something where you can go find some nature.
Oh,
Or
I
of
have a
course
friend in
plant.
Chicago who walks through the graveyard.
Nice. Yeah, grass, literally anything that's not concrete you can put your feet on. Great. Um and again, house plants. Even I've had this question before of like, if I'm literally agoraphobic and I cannot go out of my house, like, what do I do to connect with nature? There are great nature documentaries. There's
Yes.
beautiful YouTube clips. You can pull up nature sounds, watch a video. Like, they make videos for cats where, like, it shows a log with birds and squirrels coming to eat nuts. I
I
had to
love that.
stop putting that on my TV because the cats attacked the TV and nearly knocked it off the wall. Whole other story. But there's always connecting with nature through media if you don't have another opportunity. But that is grounding and centering. It brings back that sense of there's more to life than this human trauma experience. There's beautiful things out there. And I think that that softens the shadow work too.
I love that so much. Thanks for talking to me today, Seth. Will
Absolutely.
you come back and
Always.
talk to me again?
Always.
Okay.
Anytime.
All right. And if people want to find you, how can they find you?
Best place is safrianna.com. So my first name, safrianna.com. I'm under socials as Queer Spirit Guide in most places, but
Awesome.
safrianna.com is going to be the best place to go to find all of that.
Thank you so much. And we'll put the link to your website in the show notes too. You're awesome.
Absolutely.
I love you.
You're awesome. I love you.
Bye bye.
Bye.